Hi, how are you going? It's Petra here, and welcome to another episode of my video blogcast thing. Podcast. That's probably the word that I'm looking for. I am not going to open up saying this is By Manos vintage knitting, although I just have, but I am planning to change the name. So hopefully I will have already. I have been toying with either Manos Makes or Made by Manos because actually my surname Manos means hands in Spanish, which is probably Latin, which means that it probably means hands in a range of different languages. And in actual fact, I did not originally have this surname. I chose it myself because when I was getting divorced from my first marriage, I had my ex-husband's surname and I was pregnant, and I decided that I wanted a brand new name for my family. So at the time I was knitting with Manos de Uruguay yarn, and I really liked the yarn and I liked the whole idea behind it, so I decided to choose the name Manos. So since then I've been remarried and I have not taken my husband's surname. I've kept Manos because it's special to me. So given that I like to make things with my hands, it did seem fitting that I would use Made by Manos or Manos Makes. So by now I will have already chosen, and most likely I have already renamed the videocast, but for now I haven't decided yet. Anyway, I will continue on. It's basically I'm continuing on in the same vein as the previous one. Nothing else has changed other than the name. I do still like to knit items from vintage patterns between the 1930s and the 1980s. Alrighty, so I have a few finished objects, and I don't tend to film anything very frequently because first of all, it takes me a little while to finish any object, and I'm sure you get sick of seeing whips, but also I do have a bit of a noisy family. My husband's taking the dog for the walk, so that's a couple of family members out of the way, and my children are currently listening to YouTube with their headphones on, so I thought it might be a good opportunity to record something. Anyway, so I will move on quickly, otherwise the additional noisy family members will turn up and I'll be partway through it. So this time I have 3 finished objects. I must say, since I've started using a knitting machine, I have actually been finishing things, which has been really exciting because I would actually like to wear more knitted clothes. I pretty much just wear knitwear every day as it is, and I'd like to have a bit more variety of things to wear. It's currently the middle of summer. Well, actually it's not the middle of summer, it's the beginning of summer, but I am kitted out in knitted top and knitted skirt, which is my finished object, or one of my finished objects. And I do get some odd looks when I go out and about. I do get a few odd looks because what's most fashionable where I live is kind of activewear, and like baggy tops, activewear and sneakers is the primary fashion around here. And vintage looking woolen items in our hot climate is not fashionable and it's not normal. So going to the supermarket this morning, I got a few looks, but that's okay. Each to their own. I really love making my own things, and given that I know how to knit and I don't really sew, I would like more garments that are made from wool. And actually I find wool is very breathable because especially if I knit at with finer yarn, then it's naturally airy anyway, and so I feel that when there is like a breeze outside, then that kind of flows through my clothing, as opposed to these days so much stuff is made out of polyester. It's gross, and it just feels hot and sweaty and plasticky, and polyester-y. When I'm wearing woolen garments, I don't feel like that at all. I feel like I'm actually quite a bit cooler than some of the others that are wearing their activewear. Yeah, the thought of wearing polyester skin tight leggings on a hot day actually doesn't fill me with joy at all. So I would much rather have a woolen skirt. Anyway, so I have finished one skirt and two tops. I'm wearing the skirt. The top I'm wearing is an older one. So actually, this particular skirt is this particular top is a vintage one. It is from a Jack Frost pattern, and this is made from cashmere from Colour Mart that I dyed myself. And I don't know that we're going to get the skirt in. Let's see, we can get a little bit of the skirt. The skirt actually goes down to my shins. So what if I stand on the chair? I don't know. We shall see. All right, here we go. There we go. So it's a reasonably long skirt, and I really love the colour. It goes up to my waist. Now I probably still need to do something with the waist, so I'll turn around and I'll show the back. If it looks a little bit ripply at the back, it's because I've only put elastic at the back. And so what that's meant is that my seams are actually pulling in towards the back, because I thought, well, maybe I only need to put elastic around half of it. I was in a bit of a hurry when I was putting the elastic in, and I thought, well, that's all right, I only need elastic on half of it, but it means that the seams get pulled backwards a little bit, and it means it's a little bit puckered at the back. So probably next time I would choose to do it slightly differently. Also, I don't know if you can see, I've got something on underneath, but where I put the elastic in, I've just got crochet there, and the elastic kind of sticks up a little bit. Sometimes it's visible. So I'm trying to work out how to solve that. It's fine when it's under a top, but I wouldn't want to have it just visible on its own. But I really love the wool skirt. It just feels, warm on my legs. But when I go outside, it feels cool because it's knitted fabric and the air blows through. And it's really nice. I've never had a knitted skirt before, and I want to have one in every colour that I knit tops with from now on. I pretty much feel like I just want to buy 500 or 600 grams of wool whenever I buy wool, or more, and then just make a matching set of things, especially on the knitting machine. It's not that hard to make on the knitting machine. So I did make this on the knitting machine. The wool that I used is Bendigo Woolen Mills 3-ply Classic. I had never used that wool before. I'd used the Luxury, and I don't like Luxury. The Luxury is very pilly. This one doesn't pill as much. It's still a little bit pilly. I'm not going to say it's not pilly, but given that it's a superfine merino, I don't think you're going to find any superfine merino that's completely not pilly. It's not a really tight twist either, so I wouldn't use it for socks or anything like that. 100% wool. But it is very soft, and like the difference between the Luxury and the Classic is not as soft as the Luxury, and it is probably slightly more tightly twisted than the Luxury is, but honestly, it is still very soft, especially given that some of the wool that I have used in the past is like a British breed wool, and this is Australian wool, and it's merino, so it's just very soft anyway, and I can't really tell the difference, to be honest, between the Classic and the Luxury. But the Classic is very good value for money. It comes in 3-ply cones of 500 grams, and in Australian dollars it comes to $45 for the 500 grams, which is about the equivalent of $30 US for a 500 gram cone. So this is what they look like. So you get about that much for $45 Australian, about $30 US. And so this is going to be my next one. From making the skirt, I still have that much left. So what I'm planning to do with this is start making a matching top, but there's not going to be enough for a whole top. So I'm going to make a matching top with colour work. One of the ones that, there's a few different patterns that are similar. They've got one colour at the bottom, and then there's colour, and then a different colour at the top, and then there's a picture that goes across the chest. That's the inverse. So you've got, so there's some with leaves where they've got, so like I say, I had red at the bottom, yellow at the top. They would then have red leaves in the yellow and yellow leaves in the red, and they're like mirror images of each other. And yeah, there's a few different patterns like that, and I'm planning to use this leftover as one of the patterns with some of the other wool that I've got. And then if I use that wool also for another matching skirt, then I'll have two tops and two skirts. Sorry, I'll have two skirts and one top that matches both of the skirts. So that's the plan. Anyway, I am super happy with it. I'm really enjoying this skirt. I've been wearing it all the time. It goes with some of my other knits as well, so I've been really stoked. Alrighty, well, as it turned out, last weekend when I finished the skirt, I also finished another project at the same time. Actually, before I go on to talk about that, is there anything else I need to say about the skirt? Actually, yes. All right, so the process of the skirt, let me go back and tell you about that. So I did run into a couple of problems with the hem that I made not being big enough. I chose to use a hung hem method for the knitting machine, and I might have to insert a bit of video of just a close-up of it, but I tried to use a very short hem. I didn't want it to look bulky, so I used only an 8-row hem, which I then hemmed underneath, and it turned out that wasn't enough hem, so it has a habit of flipping up. I tried to pin it down and block it, but it didn't really work, unfortunately. So the hem does flip up a bit. Next time I make one, I will definitely use a larger hem. The original pattern doesn't tell you to hem it at all. It just tells you to put a few chains of crochet at the end, which I didn't do because I don't know how to crochet, and I'm just worried that it's going to look messy. I mean, I can definitely teach myself crochet, I guess, but I thought I would try the hem method. So next time I could either just go with the crochet as written, or I could use a bigger hem. And I'm thinking that I will try the hem again, but I'm going to try a bigger hem, and then perhaps third time I'll try the crochet method. Anyway, so the original pattern does tell you to go in the round, but I wanted to use my knitting machine, so I did 2 panels flat. And because it was originally designed for hand knitting, it does tell you to knit a certain amount of rows and then decrease multiple times in the same row. So you are meant to decrease about 15 times in one round, which, because I was doing it flat, I changed that. I originally started doing that method, so I decreased 8 times in one row, but to do that on the machine you have to take it off the machine and then rehang it with the decreases in there, if that makes sense, because you can't decrease in the middle of a row on a knitting machine, because the way that it's hanging on the knitting machine is each stitch has its own needle, so you can't just shrink in multiple places in the middle of the row, because in doing so that you have to shuffle then all of the stitches along, and that's really time consuming. It's actually faster to just take the whole thing off and then decrease when you hang it back on again. So I did that a few times. I took it all off, decreased a bunch, rehung it again, and it was working fine, but I was just getting bored because it's a bit time consuming that way. And in fact, I did record a video saying, well, it's fine to do knittly things, even if you're using machine, because it is faster to use a machine than to hand knit. But even then, I just found the process of taking it off and putting it back on again boring. It just wasn't what I felt like doing, so I decided to convert the rest of the pattern into just decreasing on the sides. And the reason that I hadn't done that in the first place was I thought that it would change the shape, which I guess fundamentally it will have, but it didn't really look that much different. And another part of what made a difference for me was when you are taking it off and then hanging it back onto the machine, I was worried that there was going to be like a visible stripe where I was rehanging it. I was finding that was happening sometimes, but luckily it blocked out, so you can't really tell in a finished one. But decreasing on the sides just made it so much faster for me, and just overall it was faster and easier, and it didn't have lines, so I will just do it that way next time. I've written the pattern out in the new designed way for myself, so I can just follow my recipe next time and still end up with the same kind of skirt but with the decreases on the side. I did run into an issue though, because I don't know how, but I ended up with 10 rows more on one side than on the other side, and I had to seam them. And I seam with mattress stitch, and there's 310 rows per side, and that's a lot of mattress stitch to do, because as you're doing a mattress stitch you have, sorry, I just got someone walking past me. As you're doing the mattress stitch, you have you kind of hook the yarn or the thread that you're using into the stitch on both sides, and so 310 rows worth of mattress stitch is actually 620 rows worth of hooking the yarn in. My daughter's walking past again. Yeah, so, and I've got that on each side, so it ends up being 1240 stitches to do by hand when seaming that way. So it is a little bit time consuming, but I think it gives a better finish compared to back stitch, because it's consistent. You're always going the same, like up a stitch, and so it looks really tidy. So I do like the mattress stitch. And also something that I discovered that I like to do with my knitting machine, I'll show you. So I was just experimenting with the different transfer tools that I get, and the transfer tools are used for making the decreases on the sides. And I wasn't sure where I wanted the decrease to be. So initially, when I first started using the knitting machine, I used it's probably going to focus on my face. I used this like 2 needle transfer tool, and then I came to the conclusion that the decrease was happening too close to the edge. It was impacting my seaming, because I tend to use a 2-stitch selvage. So then I switched to this 3 needle tool, this one here, and I know Emily Kate mentioned this in one of her most recent videos, that she uses a 3 needle tool. Well, I found that having the decrease on the 3rd stitch still a little bit close to my selvage for my liking, because then I have a 2-stitch selvage and then the decrease is immediately butting up to that. And I like to still give myself a little bit of room, so I like my decrease to be on the 4th stitch from the edge, not the 2nd or the 3rd. And so I had this other tool, which is an adjustable 7-stitch version, and you can essentially have as many as you like out of the 7, and then tighten it. The problem with this one, and so this was, I was happy because I was doing the 4, but the problem with this one, I think it's just the one that I have, is a little bit wonky. The needles are not all perfectly even with each other, and so what I was finding is it was causing my yarn to sometimes split and catch when I was transferring them. So in the end, I jumped on Amazon and I bought myself a set of 10 needle transfers, and what I do is I just choose, so if I'm using it on the very edge, it's okay because the other the needles that aren't in use don't catch on anything. So I'm able to just use the 4 out of the 10 as long as it's on the edges, and I can do that on both sides. And I just need to make sure that my knitting machine carriage is just out of the way enough that I can fit this more bulky tool in. I've been doing that ever since, and I much prefer it because now when I seam there's no decreases anywhere near the seam, and it just makes my seaming process much easier, and then I'm happier. But anyway, I was getting to the point. So I had somehow I had ended up with 10 rows more on one side than on the other. I really don't know how I did that, and I was worried that I had maybe seamed it incorrectly because I got all the way to the top and I was like, oh no, they didn't end at the top together when I did my mattress stitch, and it took quite a long time to seam that many stitches. And the only real way that I could find out would be if I was to seam the other side as well, and if there was the same number of rows in error, then it meant that I had knit too many rows or not enough rows on one side, and if they matched when seaming the other side, it meant that my seaming was incorrect, which would mean that I'd have to unseam it all. But as it turned out, I seamed the other side, and I also had another 10 rows incorrect on that side as well. So it really was just that I had somehow knit 10 rows more on one side than on the other side, and I was able to correct it and then just seam from there. It was a bit interesting correcting it because I'd already seamed the whole garment to that point. There was just one row one side had 10 rows less, so I had to hang the entire garment on the machine, knit another 10 rows, and then take it off. So I managed, but it was a little bit different. All right, so I think that's everything to say about my skirt. Yeah, I mentioned the elastic around the waist. I really didn't do a great job. I just crocheted a chain around and then thread elastic through, but it's visible from the outside, so I need to learn a new technique. I'm going to have to do a bit of research when it comes to that. Okay, so the next thing that I made was this top, and this one I've also made on my knitting machine. So this was the second project that I cast on my machine. Actually, the first project I cast on my machine is also finished, but this one was on top of the pile. So this one I finished most recently, and I finished it on the same weekend as I finished my skirt, and I am happy with it. So this one is called with a Fashionable Slit Neckline, and it has essentially these moss stitch tabs all around, so it's got holes in it. I have found that this project is not bra friendly. It needs to use a strapless bra, and typically with my vintage knitting I wear a bodysuit singlet under them, so I can't do that either. So I might have to buy a bodysuit that's a strapless one, because I just like the feel of having the bodysuit underneath. It just holds everything in nice, and I don't know, it just feels comfortable as well for me. I think I'm just used to it now, wearing a bodysuit under my vintage knits, so I just enjoy the comfort of having that on. anyway, so I had to, with this particular project, in fact, I might go and change into it now so that you can see it on a person, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. All right, so with this one, it is, like I was saying, it's not bra friendly. I've had to wear it with a strapless bra. I am definitely planning to order like some other underwear to go under it so that I can have a bodysuit underneath. But what it does mean though is it's really nice and light for summer. It is made from, so this was actually supposed to be a fingering weight yarn, but when I looked at it, it did say 700 meters per 100 grams. My husband and dog have just got home. So it did say 700 meters per 100 grams. So it is a little bit on the lighter side than I would normally knit with, which just means it just feels really light and airy. Potentially it means that it bounces up a little bit in around this neck area. It hasn't got enough weight to pull it down all the time, but I think that it's fine. I don't feel like it's pulling up too much, and I have redesigned the pattern to fit me anyway, so that's fine. And so with this one, I show you, I don't have a ribber on my knitting machine, but I wanted to do this on the knitting machine, so I used the latch hook method to rib this one, which I actually quite like, because when I latch hook on the rib side, it makes the, so that's so you have the wrong side facing you, and when you latch hook on the wrong side, the right side actually looks a lot nicer because you haven't got the knit stitches from the latch hook, you've actually got the knit stitches from the purl side. Everyone's coming home now. Yeah, so that turned out quite nicely. And then the pattern that's in this one is an interesting pattern. It has 9 stitches. Yes, it's 9 stitches and then a ladder. And so every 9 stitches is the ladder, and that goes for 8 rows, and then the ladders shift over by 4 stitches, and then there's another 8 rows with a ladder, and then it shifts back. So there's always a ladder. And if you were going to knit that by hand, you would actually do a yarn over, knit the 8 rows, and then ladder down to where the yarn over started. But on the knitting machine, you're able to just use the transfer tool to transfer the stitches across and then just not knit that column at all. So what that means is that the ladders on my machine knit version are not as loose as they would be if they were hand knit there, which I quite like the effect of, because it means that my top's not just really see-through. But you can still see the pattern when you look up close, but it's not showing a whole bunch of body. Like it pretty much just looks lacy. It doesn't look like see-through or anything like that, which I prefer. I did have to do a little bit though on the edge of the sleeve here. I did have to do one set of the 8 rows by hand using the hand method, and so these ones ended up larger ladders than everywhere else, and that's because when you can't do the moss stitch, so there's moss stitch on the edge here, you can't do moss stitch on a knitting machine, and so I did the moss stitch by hand, and then when I tried to put it on the knitting machine it was too tight and I just couldn't hang it on the knitting machine, so I had to first do several rows of straight knitting using the ladder method like they say in the pattern, and then I was able to hang it on the machine and do the machine knitting from there. So I did adjust the pattern quite a lot. I essentially resized it to fit my measurements, but when it comes to these moss stitch tabs, you have to have 5 moss stitch tabs at the front, and they have a base of 12 stitches each, 3 moss stitch tabs on each shoulder and then 4 on the back. So I needed to make sure that when I adjusted the sizing, it was going to have that number of stitches all around at the top. And I just adjusted it to fit me in height, width, and like the correct bust measurement, and then I decreased it to the correct number of stitches that I needed for that top part. Because you can't do moss stitch on the machine, I hand knit the moss stitch that goes around the neck, and I hand knit these tabs. And I did make a little bit of an error, but I think it was probably fine. But what's the word I'm looking for? I sewed in all of the ends before I sewed this part on. You're supposed to sew that to each of these little tabs, and then I realised that I had already woven in all the ends, so I didn't have any ends left to do that. So I ended up just using an extra piece of yarn, and I just wove it all on the inside of the garment across this part here, and then used it to sew them on at each stage. We have cats. Yeah, so I don't know how neat that turned out. I was a little bit disappointed. I made a mistake with the button. When I sewed it on, I accidentally sewed it so that the buttonhole would just be slightly to the side, so it's not centered. But what I'm planning to do, actually, I've only got one of this button. I did like this button. I thought the button looked nice, but I'm planning to take this button out, find 2 buttons that are the same, that will look nice, and I can have one button here and then one button just on the side, and then it will be centered on either side of this central panel. So yes, that's something I'll just do later when I get around to it. I just didn't have any, I don't have 2 matching buttons that I want to use in my button tin, so I'll have to just look out for some. Is there anything else? Oh, so in terms of the yarn that I used, I don't have this one handy. It was by yarnsfromitaly.com. It was, I don't think that the yarn is still available. I've looked for it since then and they don't have the same one again. But it was a mixture of alpaca, wool and acrylic. So it's about, I believe it's 50% acrylic, 40% wool, 10% alpaca. And actually it was really nice as an early project for learning machine knitting, because it doesn't, if you drop a stitch, it doesn't really unravel a lot. It only drops by a couple of rows. And even when I was trying to do the ribbing at the bottom, I was actually having to force it to unravel because it sticks on itself, which is really nice. And even though it is very fine with the 700 meters per 100 grams, it blooms, and it's, I think it's a single. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's a single, and it blooms. So it fills up the gaps and it doesn't look like there's not enough yarn. It just fills out all the spaces. So I'm really happy with it actually as a yarn, and I'm glad that I've got quite a bit left. I might still use it again for a cardigan, or I could make a matching skirt as well, like I did before. Anything else to say about this one? Yeah, I did generally find it a little bit hard sewing this thing on. I had to do that 3 times because I kept getting the spacing incorrect. I don't know if it's perfect now. And I think there's a few spots where my sewing hasn't been great and it's like curled a little bit. So I would definitely like to learn some sewing techniques to join like a flat piece to a flat piece better, if that makes sense. Because using some of the standard sewing techniques that I know leave a seam, and I didn't really want much of a seam when it comes to this type of thing. So I think I probably needed to learn a different sewing technique that I didn't know. Something to look out for next time. I don't think there's anything else you need to know about this one. Alrighty, so last but not least is this 3rd finished project. This is my first knitting machine project. I essentially just wanted something that I could knit up as a rectangle. So I don't have any shaping in this at all. I started at the waist, knit up in a rectangle, and then I thought I wanted some kind of decoration at the top. So I stopped knitting when I got up to here, added some more. What did I do? I basically added some Fair Isle. The colour change is fairly subtle. I didn't really have some exactly the same yarn that was in a nice contrast colour, so I just used something that was in a similar colour that I had left over, some Manos del Uruguay Silk Fino, I think it was, in a very similar colour. And on the back I don't have the colour work, I just went all the way to the top. So it's got a boat neck because it's literally just a straight line at the top. I did stitch up the sides and then use a couple of buttons here to close that so that I could get it over my head. And I was originally going to have it as cap sleeves, or as like a vest style, and I thought it would have cap sleeves, but it is fairly narrow. So I decided instead, sorry about the cat noise, I decided instead that I would add some sleeves. So I mentioned this in my last podcast. I used a book that came with my, it didn't come with the machine originally, but it came in the bundle of books that I got with my machine. And it said, it had a recipe for how to do sleeves. So I just knit some sleeves using that recipe and sewed them in. So it kind of looks like I've done a set and shoulder, but actually all I've done is knit square and the colour work pulled in here, which gave it the impression of having a some sleeve shaping, even though I didn't do it. And I think this has turned out really well. The only thing is, I'm not really a big fan of adding my ribbing on after the fact and knitting down, because I find it's a bit tight around the, like at the point where the ribbing hits the hips. So, but I have adjusted it to be wide enough. It's just, I just prefer casting on in the rib rather than finishing in the rib. One other thing that I probably wouldn't buy this yarn again, this one is a cashmere from Colour Mart. Look, they might have some cashmeres that are great, but this particular one biases. And I remembered actually, after mentioning it, I think I mentioned it in the last video, it biased a bit and I wasn't sure why, but then I remembered that when I used the same yarn but in a different colourway, that one also biased. So this particular yarn, obviously it just biases and that's just the way it is. I was wondering if maybe it was because it was on a cone, but the coned yarn I got from Bendigo Woolen Mill didn't bias, whereas this one did. And when I say it's biasing, essentially the symptom that that has, I don't know how obvious it is, but certainly when it's not being worn, the seam wants to come forward on one side a little bit and go backwards on the other side. Like it just wants to twist a little bit. So when I'm wearing it, I have to remember to actually adjust it so that the seams are on the side. And as long as I'm wearing it, like because I'm wearing it over a wool skirt, it actually grips onto itself pretty well. But if I was wearing it over something slippery, it might start to rotate a little bit again, and then you can see the seam more on one side. And certainly if I wasn't wearing it on anything, it if I'm just holding it straight up, it twists on itself. But how am I going to do this? I think I don't really know how to set these camera things up, but essentially, no, we can see more of the, hello cat, this cat's been making a bit of noise. Right, I think that works. So, sorry I didn't model the pink one, but it pretty much looked the same on the back as on the front anyway, so I'm sure you get the gist of it. Alright, I might as well show you the last thing that I'm working on. So this, well actually no, there's other projects I'm working on, but I'm just not going to show them because they haven't really changed much since last time. But this is a whip that I am working on. I have been busy working on seaming it. The original pattern is a 1950s pattern and does not have stripes. So the stripes makes it look distinctly 1930s. So it's kind of a 1930s, 1950s mashup. And I did it on the machine, and when I first knit it on the machine, I did the back, and I thought that the gauge was probably okay, but it turned out not to be, and my garment ended up 42 inches wide, even though I have a 35-inch bust. So what I ended up doing was changing the gauge completely, and now it is 34 inches. So now it's got negative ease, which is going to be...
Hello, Otto. You waiting for me to leave so you can do this again, eh?
Yeah, because you've just interrupted me.
Hello. Come on. Let's go have a look.
Okay, now that the husband and dog are home, we're going to have lots of interruptions. So, what was I saying? Yeah, so ended up having negative ease, unfortunately, because I went from... It turns out the settings are quite sensitive. So I went down by 3 tension settings, and the exact same wool went from 42 inches down to 34 inches. So this one's going to have a small amount of negative ease, but won't be too bad. And what I ended up doing was I added some extra stitches into the sleeves. So the sleeves do fit quite nicely with a little bit of ease. And then the main part of the garment will be pretty much figure hugging. And I'll just make sure to add plenty of ribbing so that it doesn't ride up. Because I've been finding that quite a few of my items, I just find them a little bit small height-wise. I'm 5'7.5", 5'8", depending on, well, that's barefoot, but I don't know. I'm probably 5'7.5". I'm sure I haven't got taller. But I find that a lot of the vintage clothes are designed for smaller persons than myself, and so I usually have to add a bit of extra height. Anyway, and well, the problem is if you have negative ease, then it needs more height, because as your width expands, more of the yarn goes into expanding sideways, and therefore you need more height to offset that. So the wider you get, the longer your knits need to be. Or you have to add extra stitches. But in this case, I haven't added any extra stitches. So, but yes, the sleeves do fit quite nicely. Yeah, I think that's actually a kind of a perfect fit. And because it's a 1950s pattern, it's got a 3/4 length sleeve, which I think is going to be quite nice. And I'm at the moment working on the collar, and it's going to be a 1950 style collar with a bit of an overlap at the front, and then it will go around the neck. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll do the other sleeve and put some ribbing on the bottom, and then it'll be done. It has taken ages and ages and ages and ages and ages to weave in all of the ends, and I haven't done all of them, but I have done the sleeve, woven in all those ends, but on the other side I have not. I still have plenty of ends to do, and when I have the other sleeve finished off the machine, there'll be more ends again to do. Never ending ends to weave in with this particular project. Each stripe is 4 rows tall, and you have 2 rows 2 ends for each row, because obviously you start a colour and then you end it. So essentially, I don't have too many ends for the black because I'm carrying that up the side, but essentially then for every 8 rows, I have 2 ends. Is that right? Yeah, every 8 rows I have 2 ends, so it's equivalent of 1 end every 4 rows. But I'm looking forward to having the finished project. And so I'm working on this one pretty busy, and I expect that it will be finished by Christmas. I do have some other projects that I'm working on at the moment, such as my Norwegian-German star patterned lice pattern jumper, which I'm not going to bother showing you. It hasn't progressed so much more that it's worthwhile showing. And I do still have another cardigan in DK weight that's on the needles that I haven't touched. And I've got a few other whips that are just sitting around not being touched. I'm considering casting something else new on the machine, but I've been holding off, and I'm about to get my new to me machines back from being serviced, which have a ribber, in the next week or 2. So there's probably not much point in me starting another project on this one. I might as well, because the new machines I'm getting a little bit more advanced and have a ribber. So assuming that all works, then I'll probably use that one, even though I like this machine. Anyway, so that's happening soon, and I'm really looking forward to using the ribber. And my next plan is to make a ribbed. I'd like to make a ribbed cardigan, but I think I might really like a ribbed twin set. So that's on the cards. You know, I've been looking at heaps and heaps of pattern pictures and dreaming about different patterns. So that's happening very soon. Alrighty. Well, I think that's pretty much it in terms of what I want to show you. And thanks for tuning in this far along if you have been doing so. I really appreciate that you have been watching the video. One of the things that I would really like in the future, and please help me out because I'm not sure how to accomplish this, but I would really like to encourage a bit of chat and conversation on my YouTube videos. I don't really know how to encourage more of that. I guess I need to ask people questions in the video themselves. So, and this is where I don't always know what questions to ask, but I guess I can put it out there. What are you working on? Please tell me what you're working on. I'm really keen to know a bit more about what you're doing. And do you have anything that you're planning to have finished for Christmas? I'm not needing anything specifically Christmassy, although one project that I haven't shown you, the Fair Isle that I am working on, it is in Christmas colours in Adelaide. So here we have our a purple tree that flowers every November. So that's kind of our Christmas colours, is this light purple. But it's not going to be finished anywhere near in time for Christmas. Maybe it will get finished over that Christmas break when I take some leave, but maybe not. Anyway, so I would love to hear what kind of projects you're doing. Actually on that, I am an admin on 2 groups on Facebook. So originally I was an admin on a group called Vintage Knitting in the Modern World. Actually, I shouldn't say originally because I've only been an admin there for about 6 months or so. But that particular group allows knitting, but it doesn't allow any machine knitting or crochet, and it doesn't allow anyone to ask for patterns. And I wanted a group that would enable machine knitters, crocheters, knitters, macrame, embroidery, anything at all that used yarn that was in the theme of 1920s through to 1980s projects or fashion, I guess. And so I started a new group called 1920s to 1980s all yarn all fibre crafts. Beg your pardon. All fibre crafts. So if you are interested in joining that group, please do so. It's a brand new group, so we've only got about, I think we're up to about 83 people, but the people that are there are all quite active, make a lot of beautiful vintage clothes. It's just been amazing seeing everyone's pictures, really, really nice. And so it's already quite an active group, and I encourage anyone who's interested in yarn and using vintage patterns to join that group and check it out. And also the Vintage Knitting in the Modern World group as well, if you are just a hand knitter and you're not interested in seeing any projects from people that do other crafts other than knitting. All right, well, I think that's it for now. So really nice to see you all again. Please do the whole like and subscribe and comment and all of that type of thing if you choose to. And I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas period. I'll catch you all later. Bye. I almost forgot. I just picked up this little book. It arrived recently. Because what I'm hoping to do is knit a very basic top and then embroider it. So this is from the 1930s embroidery. It's look, the book is pretty fragile and it isn't really designed for knitwear, but it's got some interesting techniques in here and a few kind of motifs that can be used. So I'm looking forward to trying some of them out. Yeah, we'll see if I end up using some tricks from this one on my knitted top, or if probably what I'll end up doing is just getting a modern embroidery book as well to supplement my knowledge. But I thought this one was really cute and I got it on Abe Books. I do find that Abe Books is quite good if you're looking for historical things and you don't mind paying international shipping rates, because usually things are from overseas. But yeah, ended up with this one and it is very pretty. So it's going to go along with all of my vintage patterns. Alrighty, see you.